Okay, let's talk about debits and credits. So with debits and credits, again, remember, debit and credit does not mean add or subtract. It only means left and right. And unfortunately, every single time that you've heard the word debit and credit, it's backwards from generally the way that we're going to use it. About 95% of the time, it is backwards. So unfortunately, if you thought that you knew what debit and credit meant, you don't. So that's the bad part here, but that's okay. Just be aware of that so that we can sort of move forward and actually make some progress in this debit and credit area. All right. So when we're talking about debits and credits only mean left and right. Okay, that's all it means. So now your left hand becomes your debit hand and your right hand becomes your credit hand. And that's all that it means. So it does not mean add and subtract, because depending on what account you're dealing with, a debit could be an add or a subtract. Don't you love it? So let's take a look at some debits and credits and how they work. So when you're talking about anything, it's all based on the balance sheet, by the way. So when we're looking at the balance sheet, all the assets, they're on the left-hand side of the equal sign, so they're going to go up on the left. Okay, so instead of using a single columnar format and we use adds and subtracts, we use a two-columnar format and we use left and right. Okay, so again, when you're talking about assets, they're on the left-hand side of the equal sign, so they're going to go up on the left, down on the right. Then, when we're over here in the liability section of the balance sheet, the liabilities are on the right-hand side of the equal sign. So they're going to go up on the right and down on the left. Okay? The stock section of the balance sheet, on the right-hand side of the equal sign, it's going to go up on the right, down on the left. Okay? Retained earnings is the same way. It's going to go up on the right, down on the left. So when we are looking at debits and credits and we're talking about revenues, expenses, and dividends, the thing that you have to keep in mind is this. What effect does revenues and or expenses or dividends have on retained earnings? Okay, so when we increase revenues, retained earnings increases. So retained earnings is going to function exactly the same as retained earnings account. So it's going to go up on the right and down on the left. Okay? When we're talking about expenses and dividends, as expenses and dividends increase, retained earnings will actually decrease. So when that happens, now we're talking about essentially a contra equity account. So contra, contrary, works opposite. So expenses, as expenses and dividends increase, they're actually going to go up on the left and down on the right. Okay? So that's how debits and credits work. So we'll look in the next recording, we will look at Chapter 2, and we'll look at the transactions in Chapter 2, and we'll plug them into this spreadsheet so that we can see what's happening as these transactions are occurring.